Everyone, welcome to Week 8 Mathematics. Today we're following on from what we did last lesson, where we looked at multiply, adding and subtracting fractions. Today what we're looking at doing is we're looking at multiplication with decimals and single-digit numbers. We've got 5 steps that we're going to be following today. We're going to be practicing in our groups on Tuesday, and then as the week progresses, we'll get progressively harder, moving on to 2-digit numbers, etc. To have success in this lesson today, you're going to follow these 5 steps. The first one is to estimate your responses. The second step is multiply ones by tenths and rename. Then we multiply one by ones, and we add both of those up. And then finally, we ask ourselves, is this a reasonable response? So let's start with a particular problem. We had 2.7 and we were multiplying 2.7 by 3 ones. Okay. Alright, so we start by our first step, which is estimating responses. And I ask myself this question. 2.7 times 3. Alright, what would a reasonable response to that be? And I have to use rounding to be able to help me out here. So I ask myself, well, 2.7 or 2 7/10, what whole number is that closest to? We know that once we hit 5, and we've done this in previous rounding lessons, that we round up. So if I've got 2 7/10, I'm rounding up to my nearest one, which is 3. 3 and 3 equals 9. So my estimation is my answer should be around about 9. Now we know it's going to be a little bit less than that, alright, because we've got 2 7/10, not 3, but I reckon somewhere between 8 and 9 would be a reasonable response. So there you go, first step done, I've estimated. My next step tells me that I need to multiply my ones by my tenths. Now whenever I multiply 1 by tenths, my answer is going to be in tenths, in this particular case. 3 multiplied by 7/10 equals 21/10. Now I rename 21/10 as 2 ones and 1/10, because, as we've been doing last week, 21/10 can be renamed as 2 ones and 1/10. Next, I multiply my ones. Oh, hold on, I need to tick off that I multiply my ones by my tenths, which I've done. Next, I multiply my ones by my ones, and this is easy. 3 multiplied by 2 equals 6 ones, and because we're dealing with decimal points, we put a placeholder in that tenth position. Fantastic. Now the last step that I have to do is just simply add those two up. Now I haven't got space down the bottom to be able to do that. I'll try my best, but I don't think you'll be able to see it. But you can clearly see that 1/10 equals, I'll try and do it here, equals 1, and 6 and 2 equals 8. So my answer is 8 and 1/10. Is that a reasonable response? My estimation at the start was somewhere between 8 and 9, so 8 and 1/10 is definitely a reasonable response. So I can tick that off. Once again, following those 5 steps. Estimate your response, multiply 1 by tenth and rename, multiply ones by ones, add both of them up, ask yourself, is that reasonable? Okay, now we're going to move on to a slightly harder problem now. Alright, but once again our process does not change. We estimate our responses first, we multiply our ones by 1 by tenths and rename, and we know that when we multiply ones by tenths, our answer is going to be in tenths. We multiply ones by ones, we add both of them up, and we ask ourselves, is this reasonable? So my problem that I'm going to start with here is 4 and 6/10, and I'm multiplying them by 7. My equal sign in, pretty straight from me there. So the first step is to estimate your responses. I've got 4 and 6/10, and I'm multiplying by 7. 4 and 6/10. I could either round that down to 4 or I could round that up to 5. Because it's 6 and we know that 5 is our benchmark number where we round up, I'm going to round that up to 5. 5 times 7 is 35. Okay? So with that being the case, I'm predicting that my answer is going to be somewhere around about between, say, 30 and 35, around about that particular mark. So anywhere between 30 and 35, I'd be pretty satisfied that I'm somewhere around the mark. Alright, let's start with our, so we can tick that off. Let's start with our second step, which is multiplying our ones by our tenths. 7 ones multiplied by 6 tenths equals 42 tenths. Now I can rename 42 tenths as 4 ones and 2 tenths. And I write that down, and I'm done. I've renamed and I've multiplied. My next step is I multiply my ones by my ones. So 7 ones multiplied by 4 ones. Now that equals 28 ones. Or, as I could rename it, 2 tens and 8 ones. Because I'm dealing with decimals, even though I haven't got any tenths, put my decimal point down. Also make sure I've got a placeholder. I've done that. Now I add these up using simple right to left addition. 2 tenths plus 0 tenths is 2 tenths. Our decimal point never changes, so I can place that there. 8 ones plus 4 ones is 12 ones. I can rename that as 2 ones and 1 ten. 2 tens plus 1 ten equals 3 tens. Now I've added them up, I can ask myself this question: is this a reasonable response? Well, my prediction was somewhere between 30 and 35. The answer is 32 and 2 tenths. I think that's a pretty reasonable response. Hey, grade 6, the key things that I want you to take away, and I should be seeing this in your video. Sorry, I should be seeing this in your flipped maths books. You need to estimate your responses. You need to multiply ones by tenths and then rename. You need to multiply ones by ones. You need to add both of them up. But most importantly, you need to ask yourself, is this reasonable? To finish off with today, I want one question done for homework, alright, that I want you handed in to your teacher. It's 8 and 9 tenths multiplied by 6. All I ask is you to answer that question. It's a pretty easy task. I hope you've been able to get something out of this particular video. I look forward to the more challenging questions that are going to come later in the week. But without this base knowledge, you're really going to struggle. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again next week, grade 6.